exactly where you are right now. I was launching my son and my daughter, and I'd like to start this program with a short video featuring Project Launch alumni from last year, parents and their children. I asked them to reflect on their first year of college and share advice with you and your students about what to expect in the coming year. So please watch this video, and if for any reason you might miss it, or anybody comes on late, I'm going to be sending this out to you in the next day or two as well, so you can watch it with your team.
Appreciate every single second. I mean, appreciate grad season right now, and then appreciate college. Like freshman year, I cannot believe how fast it's gone by.
I would say that you have to go into college with an extremely open mind.
I don't know. I think I was expecting myself to kind of figure out everything really quickly, and that didn't happen at all.
It's such a different experience than I was expecting.
You're still the one designing your college experience, and if you're unhappy, you have the power to change it.
Definitely hearing people's expectations of what college is supposed to be, how their best 4 years of their life were, and then what mine have been so far.
A lot of people, I feel like, aren't like that willing to make a big change because they're just like scared of doing something different.
And I think that like it can be the best years if you make it the best years. Like you can't just sit back and like be in your dorm, go to class.
I realized you should just do whatever you want, and then it will be the best time of your life.
This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and you have to make the most of it.
I'd say, and this is something that somebody told me right when I got here, is that just try and say yes to things that you wouldn't normally say yes to.
You need to try new things.
And just like put yourself out there, go meet people.
Like even if it's something that you might not entirely be interested in, like I said before, you're going to meet a whole different group of people that maybe you will get along with them.
Trying to join any clubs that you can, it would be a great idea to do.
Because that's how I met a lot of people when I first got here. And now some of those people are still like my best friends.
By doing that, you'll have a greater chance of finding where you're comfortable.
If you can find somebody you can talk to, that's really helpful.
I just wish that I had maybe taken home less for granted when I was home and appreciated it, like being with my family, and then that would have probably prepared me for the transition a little bit better.
It's different when they're not here. So I think that was a big adjustment for me.
I would say, first of all, we don't like the term empty nester. I don't know if you've heard the term open nest. We prefer to think of it as an open nest.
I thought it was going to be hard at first, but we are having fun and traveling and doing stuff. And Jack comes home and it's great.
There is a moment where you're like, my house is about to change, and that was hard. Like just when you know that your house is it's a different feel, and whether you have like the dynamic in your family changes.
We're trying to do something fun and different every week, whether it's go to a show or just go to a new restaurant or
just know like your kid loves you so much and appreciates you so much, but especially for freshmen, like this is the first time in their life they're independent from you.
As hard as it is, try to let go.
So they are going to practice that independence.
Like they definitely call me more, but I would say like texting has been better just because you can give like life updates.
Don't be calling them every day. If they're having a hard time at first, don't immediately think that you need to go visit them and pick them up or something. Like try and let them figure it out.
I think my parents did a really good job at just letting me sort of figure things out on my own and letting me come to them.
Like try not to worry, like you have prepared them for this.
The most important thing is to be a calming force for your child. Like you need to be I felt like I needed to be the person they can talk to, and I'm not going to get hysterical and just listen and sort of be sort of that calming person for them.
Things aren't always good, and that was kind of hard for me to realize things aren't always great. So
it can be really great, but sometimes it's also hard.
And they need to fall a little bit. Like they need to sometimes not know what to do and not have mom next to them saying, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that. Like they need to learn how to, you know, grow up a little bit, but they're going to be fine.
It does work out. And even if it doesn't seem like it does once you get there, even if it takes you a semester, like you will find that you are where like you're supposed to be.
Don't stress too much. Like your kids will probably figure out how to do college by themselves. Like it takes a little bit of time getting used to, but like they'll probably, I mean, if I can do it, then most people can do it. That's what my mom would tell you.
Hope you enjoyed that video. Again, I'm going to send that out afterwards, and I really encourage you to sit and watch it with your kids. And I got really a ton of great content, which I will be sharing with all of you that you can watch, and it'll be specific by sort of subject. So I encourage you to watch it with your kids. So again, for some of you, I sent you the wrong link. So a lot of you have my name on there. So if you would rename yourself with the 3 little dots, rename yourself who you are, put in the chat what your kid's doing next year. So tonight, we'll start with a discussion amongst our expert panelists, focusing on the social and emotional aspects of launching your child. This will be followed by plenty of time for Q&A. So please put your questions in the chat and we will get to your questions. And then after that segment, we're going to transition into focusing on more of the logistical side. So if you've already launched a kid and you feel like, okay, I got that piece, then you don't feel like you have to stay. That's going to be the last sort of half an hour. But we encourage you to stay because it's going to be really helpful advice on packing, what you and your student need to do this summer, et cetera. And again, we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A after that. So I'm honored to introduce our experts. Dr. Betsy Jensen Chapman is the Executive Director of Family Communications at Wake Forest University. Betsy is a college administrator who specializes in supporting parents and families through the emotional landscape of the transition to college. Dr. Ronnie Cohen-Sandler is a clinical psychologist, author of multiple books, and expert specializing in parenting. And Sue Borison is the publisher and editor-in-chief of Your Teen Magazine for Parents. Sue is a parenting expert, and she will be our moderator. So I'm going to hand it over to her.
I first want to say how amazing it is to hear from kids. They're so wise. They basically stole the show, and so good night.
Yeah, they don't need us.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Is there any way to get the 3 of us on at the same time? Is there any setting that people should put on their screen if they want to just see the three speakers?
Oh, Jesse's working on it. Okay.
Okay. We'll wait 1 second. But anyway, they were fabulous. I think I saw a few of this while we were watching it. And I don't know any of the kids, and I was so moved by it. So Amy, thanks for putting that together. That was really, really meaningful. And the parents were great too. Really good advice. So I'll get started as we're figuring out the setting here. We're going to open with the first question to Ronnie. What's the biggest worry you hear in your practice from parents about to launch their kids?
Sure. Well, deep down, I find that most parents' worst fear is that somehow kids won't be okay. And this is a kind of universal experience. It's been there for every parent I've ever worked with. And it was there for me twice, the 2 times that I went through this process with my own children. And this fear can be vague, or it may show up in very, very specific ways, depending on your kids' vulnerabilities and even your own vulnerabilities. And so I have 3 suggestions about that real quick. 1, whether you feel like your fear is rational or irrational, have self-compassion, okay? We're human. We've been pouring our hearts into raising our kids. We love them. And of course, we want them to be successful. And so we've been doing all this for almost 2 decades, let's say, before they launch. And so, of course, we feel this way. We want them to thrive. And the second suggestion that I have is to self-reflect a little bit, to see if you can identify what this fear is, because if you let it sort of fester in the recesses, dark recesses of your mind, it's just going to be very unhealthy. And the third suggestion is to remember that you may have a vision in your mind of what it looks like for your kids to be okay. But I think throughout the years of them being away and becoming emerging adults, it's really important to allow that process to evolve over time, because ultimately we have to be flexible, I think, and especially if our version of what our kids being okay looks like is different from theirs, which is possible.
Oh, excellent. Thanks for having all three of us up here. Good work. Okay, so Betsy, same question, but what do you hear from parents of college freshmen? What's their biggest worry?
You know, Ronnie really stole my thunder in the sense that it is everything. Well, but I'm happy that she said it, because it's my experience too. You know, your biggest worry is, will my kid be okay? And I joke with, I'm an academic advisor at Wake Forest, and I joke with students when they come into my office and they say, you know, I'm worried that my parents are going to be upset about X or Y. And I typically say, like, the taxonomy of what your family's probably worried about is, are you safe? Are you healthy? Are you happy? And like your grade in chemistry is way, way down that list. But I think we all bring our concerns about our students, and I'm the mother of a high school junior and an only child to boot, so this is in my immediate future. But I'm thinking about, you know, how will he make friends? What if his roommate snores and he can't get enough sleep? You know, what if he doesn't find a major he likes? What if he wants to transfer? I mean, it's really everything that you could worry about. And you have to kind of balance that with what one of the wise folks in the video said. You know, your kids are probably ready. Like, you've raised good kids, you've raised thoughtful, sensible kids, and they're going to find their way through it. They're going to do college perhaps differently than you did if you went to college. But we've let them loose on lots of things already. You know, they might have gone to daycare or preschool, or they went on their first, you know, first time they had to be at school all day, first date. You know, we've had a lot of times of letting go. And when I start to sort of get a little clutchy in my chest thinking about sending my own kiddo off, you know, a year plus from now, I think about, you know, we've managed all the milestones before. This one is likely to be the same. There'll be some different challenges, right? And I will have a different role in his life than I did previously. But I do have trust and faith that things are going to be okay, and that you want to make sure you've got an established relationship with your students so that if they do have a problem, they can come to you, as one of the, I think, wise moms in that video said.
Excellent. Thank you both. So I want to remind everybody to put questions in the chat. Jesse's going to be monitoring it there and then feeding them to me the second half. But if things come up for you now, you can put them in there. So I have 5 kids. When my first was going to college, I was a wreck, like just a wreck, like I think I haven't seen since. So there's one extreme. And then my business partner was kind of like, yeah, college, you know, whatever. So there's so many ways that we separate from our kids. So Ronnie, I'm going to ask you to start this question. Is there something you could tell us about right now to kind of help us through, you know, giving us a little preparation for what we can anticipate in terms of separation?
If only. if only I could provide a guidebook, right? But there's definitely no one way. There's definitely no right way. Feelings can vary, like you just said, Sue. You know, you may find that your feelings about, if you have more than one child, your feelings vary completely and in ways that you can't necessarily predict. Okay. It may have nothing to do with how your relationship is with that particular child. It can just be where you are in your own life at that particular moment, how stressful things are, if you're caring for an elder relative at the same time. And actually, sometimes we just don't know, there's that little complication that comes in called menopause or perimenopause, and you might be feeling just so vulnerable at that particular time. So, it's very unpredictable, but I really have to say that it's so important just to acknowledge how you're feeling and go with it, accept it. Don't try to push those feelings away, except for the fact that we don't want to burden our kids. We don't want to fall apart, and have them feel responsible. I mean, that is something that we want them to go away with, sort of this idea that their parents are going to be fine. And, I'm so embarrassed telling this story, but it's kind of a very apt story. When I went to college, I was the oldest, and no one in my family had gone to college, which was a blessing in many ways and a curse in others. And I remember being 17 and actually being afraid to leave my parents, that they weren't going to survive without me. I really actually had that thought, which is, of course, they lived a good life, right? That was silly. But that kind of responsibility, or that sense that you're responsible for your parents, is such a burden. So what I would say is, if you're having a hard time with it, and you might, really try to focus on that and take care of yourself, and reach out to people who have been through it, and get that kind of support for yourself, so that your child doesn't feel like he or she has to be responsible for your happiness or for your unhappiness.
And maybe even a therapist, if it's really an extreme like it was for me. That was like an amazing gift. Okay, Betsy, anything to add to that?
I think I would just add that your student, as they start this process of transitioning, they're trying to figure that out too. So they might be short-tempered with you every time you ask them about, have you made your packing list yet? Or they may be trying to put on a brave face. They may be very independent. They could be clingy. Every student sort of handles the emotional work of that separation on their own. So give them some grace if they are acting in a way that seems a little bit abnormal rather. Because they're nervous, and they're scared, and they're facing the unknown, and they're excited too. They're all the things at once. But just understand that whatever sort of snippiness they might be offering you, or acting in some different way, is just part of the process for them getting used to the idea of being gone.
So added to that is the possibility that we might feel like we're being rejected. Like in this moment of like wanting as close as we've ever been in anticipation of separating, we might actually receive what you're just saying, Betsy, as rejection. So Ronnie, why don't we start with you? How do we cope with that feeling?
It's such a great segue to what Betsy was saying, because I agree with everything that Betsy said about how kids can act differently. But I just remember that feeling as a parent, and I've been through this with so many parents, where you're just so afraid that the college experience is going to change your relationship, and not in a good way. You fear that it's going to be diminished in some way, or even gone. I've even had parents say that they didn't think that they were even going to make it onto their kids' favorite list, on their phones. They were going to drop down, all those levels, which is just such a good way to put it. But I think what's important to do in those moments is to remind ourselves of the fact that this is normal development, that kids really need to push us away a little bit in their effort to prepare themselves. Just as Betsy said, they have to prove to themselves that they can be okay without us. And I liken this to an experience that many of you might have had, where maybe a few weeks before your kids went to sleepaway camp, even if they were dying to go to sleepaway camp, they would, have nothing to do with you. They would want to be with their friends all the time. They would be snippy, as Betsy said. They'd be so irritating. My kids anyway, would be so irritating that I was counting down the days till the first day of camp. And then when they went to college, I thought, oh, here we go again. They were preparing me for this experience, because in some way they were preparing not only themselves, but me for this separation. I think it's sort of built into the whole process. So whenever you see them doing things that you're tempted to take personally, first ask yourself, is this developmental? Does it make sense in terms of the tasks that they need to be fulfilling for themselves, so that they will be able to go away and cope really well once they're away from home?
And the
That's
beauty
it.
about thinking about this in the summer is that you have the luxury of time, right? Knowledge is power. Like knowing that this could come gives you a little bit of time to sort of brace for it. And I tell families that I work with sometimes, you know, get your supportive team around you, whether that's the ladies you have book club, glass of wine with, or an actual therapist, your hairstylist, you know, your rabbi, whomever it may be. Have a person that can help you sort of manage your own anxiety about whatever you're going through, because that emotional work is ours to do as parents and family members. And sometimes for me, and I'm the most anxious person you're going to meet, knowing that something could happen helps me prepare for it, and then I can kind of plan about like, okay, how might I react when that happens, and that saves me from being in the moment and not necessarily giving my best self to my kiddo.
Okay, let's look at that summer that you just brought up. So we're about to, well, you know, depending on where you live in the country, summer is looming. And we all have like ideas of what that summer is going to look like. So Betsy, let's talk about, fast forward, you see what makes kids have a hard time adjusting. What can we do over the summer to ease that transition for them?
Yep. That's a great question, Sue. I think there's a couple things. The students in the video really alluded to this. I think the first thing, and sometimes the hardest thing, is to put your students in the driver's seat as much as possible. And we think a lot of times about the stereotypical things, make sure they know how to do laundry before they go to college. And that's important for sure. But it's other things too. Make them make their own doctor's appointment if they have to get a physical or if they have to get vaccinations. Make them order things that they need online and help them if they have to return something, make them do that process. Give them as much sort of practical, tactical experience in handling their day-to-day needs as they can. And avoid the idea of, oh my gosh, my student is so busy, it's the summer and they should just be having fun with their friends. I'll take care of all this stuff for them. It's loving and well-intended, and I totally understand that place that it's coming from, but they need practice in the tactical things. They need to know how to get up. They need not to be reminded. They need not to be prompted that there are 15 things on their to-do list, either before their gap year or as they plan to go to college. Help them be responsible for those things and be willing to stand by if it's a pretty low level error that they have a consequence for, because typically the way that we learn is if something stings us a little. I'm not saying let them fall in a terrible pit, let them forget to turn in their tuition and then they can't go. I don't mean it that way. But if they were supposed to turn Form X in by June 1st and June 1st comes and goes and they haven't done it, don't do it for them. Don't remind them 5 times. Let that happen, because they're going to need to be self-managing when they get to school. And that, as a mother who wants everything to run ship shape at my house, that's hard for me to do. But that's, again, where we can do some practice as parents. But I would say one more thing too. Have some conversations about what they want and what you want. Everything from communication, how frequently should that be, to budgeting, so you can kind of get on the same page. You may think your students know what you would hope for and expect. You might expect them to do their best in school, and they might think that, whether you've ever said anything about it or not, Mom and Dad want me to get straight A's. So have some of those like level setting conversations about what's important to you and what's important to them, and where do we need to sort of come together and agree on that, because you're going to have to be communicating at a distance once they get to college. So talk about some of those hard things now, and establish communication work well for you at the moment.
So I just have one question throwing in there. Like, so if we want them to load the dishwasher to get practice, they're going to be living in an apartment. Does that mean we can't go and redo it when they've done it wrong?
Well, here's the thing: is you just set that up for me, because I wanted to add something to the wonderful ideas that Betsy just enumerated here, and it's more on the social and emotional vein, because again, we may have ideas about how this should all look. And if we start imposing our ideas on them and asking them to do it the way we want, we may be kind of thwarting the process that we're trying to help them to develop. So what I would say is that maybe a good way to kind of think about it is to think about being a consultant rather than, assigning tasks to them. And so I would say, because, this is a process. We can't just say, okay, well, now that you're going to college, for the next 3 months, you're on your own. No, we have to sort of be there for them and talk about it. And the way I would maybe suggest is, so these things have to be done. What are your thoughts about how you want to take care of that? And so that's getting them thinking about, well, how should I take care of that? And you might be just chomping at the bit to say, well, but ask yourself really, what would be accomplished by that, Sue? Because really what you want to convey to them is that you have confidence. If you, and I'm making a joke about this, but I just remember I had this young girl that I was working with at one point, and I remember she had this big blowout with her parents in the last couple of months of school. And the reason was because they were insisting on editing her papers. And she said to them, how am I going to have any confidence in writing papers when I'm at school if you don't give me that opportunity when I'm living home? And it was just really the way she expressed it was so important, because if you're constantly correcting or saying, yeah, that's good, but, then they're not going to have the confidence, and they're going to think, more importantly, that you don't have the confidence in them doing it themselves. So it's kind of like a tricky, fine line that you want to walk between encouraging and not thwarting the process.
Okay, so you both have brought up this idea of like stepping back a little bit. And Amy was telling us that last year when she had 2 kids leaving for college, she couldn't believe how much there was to get done before they were leaving for college. And the dynamic turned out to be too much nagging. Like, have you done this? Have you done this? And none of us want, we don't sign up for parenthood to be called nags, but it's not getting done. You can't stand it. How do we deal with that? Betsy, let's start with you.
Yeah, and you're right. There's a million things to do and great big long laundry lists. And what I would fall back on is, as soon as you drop them off and you drive away from whatever campus they go to, they're going to have a big long laundry list of things that they have to do for every single class. They're going to have a course syllabus that tells them, here's all the things you have to do and what days assignments are due. And they're also going to have to do their laundry. They're going to have to do this. They're going to have to do that. So the end result is going to be the same. They're going to have to get those things done. So it's our job to sort of get comfortable with, my student is going to have to take care of these things, and their way may look different than my way. I'm a type A planner, and I have everything, all planned out and scheduled, and they may not. But it doesn't mean it won't get it done. It just means it might not get it done in a place where you feel comfortable with it. And that for me is one of the hardest things to let go of myself. So as Ronnie sort of suggested, in terms of thinking about it as a consultant, you can say, gosh, I can see there are a number of things you have to take care of in June that's on your, new student checklist. I want to make sure you have a plan to get this done. I trust you to come up with that plan. I'm happy to answer questions if you get stuck. But you need to be sort of in charge of these responsibilities, and then you kind of have to just back off and let them do it. And again, I want to reassure parents and families listening that there's very few things that, that your student is going to have like a permanent, insurmountable obstacle if they don't take care of this. College is a wonderfully safe place for students to fail at things, whether that's failing to turn in this particular form or getting something not done on time. There's very few things you can't recover from. So it's more of a matter of us being able to manage. I have to trust him that he's going to do it or she's going to do it and that it'll get done. And you can occasionally even say something like, gosh, honey, I'm such a planner. I'm really anxious. It would help me if every once in a while you'd give me a little status update and let me know kind of where you are. And they may or may not take you up on that, but you've put it to them sort of gently, like, this would be helping your poor worried mother, if you want to come at it that way, as opposed to, I need to see your list of accomplishments. But admittedly, such a tough line to walk. Ronnie, you probably have better thoughts on this.
No, I think you have great thoughts on it. The only thing I'd like to add is that we've been talking more about like the executive function kinds of things that kids need to survive when they're at college. But the other way that I hear that parents sometimes try to get like overly involved before sending off kids to college or a gap year is in the social and emotional side. So you might think to yourself, oh my gosh, I wanted them to be at this point, or I wanted to be confident that they can navigate this without me. And the parents panic and think that they have to do this during the summer, that somehow it's their last chance to instill these values or to make sure that their kids are using good judgment. And so what happens sometimes is that parents might get even stricter in the summer before kids go off to college, like all of a sudden, or they're really emphasizing, no, you can't go to that party. The parents aren't going to be home. And the graduating seniors are saying, well, in 2 months, I'm going to be at school. There are going to be no parents even there. And they have a good point, because again, you want them to have a few stumbles when they're home. You want them to test out how they use good judgment. You want them to test out when they feel like they've gone too far or they need you to step in so that they can self-correct. You'll feel better and they'll feel more confident too. So it's not just filling out forms, it's really everything that they're doing socially and emotionally as well.
To that point, one of my kids turned to me in the middle of the summer and said, no more life lessons. You did a good job raising us. I was like, done. Anyway, okay. So, one of the things that we talk a lot about at Your Teen when we're doing college stuff is like this trope of these are going to be the best 4 years of your life. So that's out there, not just because we put it out there, but because kind of the world does, high school does, there's all of this messaging coming into them. How can we make them hear that the day you set foot on college might not be meeting those expectations? Ronnie?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And for a little context here, I am seeing this sense of perfection that's just been magnified in the last 5, 7, 8 years, where kids growing up in high school today, they feel like they can't make the slightest mistake, because if they err at all, if they get a bad grade, if they're not accepted into this whatever, their life is ruined. And they're taking that with them to college, and they're feeling like if things don't go smoothly, if they don't feel like as soon as they land on campus, it's becoming, the best year of their life before, they can really feel like something's wrong with them. And maybe there's something, that they're not doing right. And they're really fearful of disappointing parents. So I think it's important to have not just one conversation, but, maybe like, I'm always fearful of like sitting down and having the big talk, but as you're interacting with your kid, in this last summer before college or gap year, start talk about the fact that, not everybody goes to college and feels ecstatically happy, when they first get there. And it's a process. It's an adjustment. And by the very nature, adjustments are stressful. And remind them of the transitions they've had before that Betsy mentioned earlier. I mean, they may not remember daycare, but they'll certainly remember the transition to middle school, the transition to high school, or the first time they went away to camp, that sort of thing. And remind them of their coping skills, remind them that they have the skills, but also say to them that you're not expecting perfection, and they shouldn't be expecting perfection of themselves either, that you will always be there to support them emotionally and to be a sounding board. And then back up what you're saying by, and I think one of the mothers said this beautifully, don't freak out. If they say, I'm having a hard time, don't get all hysterical. What do you mean? What's happening? And they can pick up on that, of course, in 2 seconds. So it's really good to take a deep breath and remember that again, this is normal. So I think preparing them ahead of time for it, and not saying it's definitely going to be difficult, but saying that it's not something that's likely to be without bumps, because that's really unrealistic.
And I like the idea of naming some of those bumps, because some of your students might run into and others they might not. But some of the bumps in the road that I think flummox students just because they're not expecting them is that they might feel lonely at times. They hadn't remembered what it was like to start at a new school and have to make 100% new friends, particularly if they've been at the same school or with the same friend group for a really long time. They may have been the best at every subject or particular subjects in high school, but now they're in a class with people that are as smart or smarter than they are. They might be homesick, they might be anxious, they might be depressed for the first time, or but also they might be excited, they might be thrilled for the new senses of freedom that they have. So I'm sort of a fan of talking to your students about the spectrum of things that they might find, so that if any of them hit, whether it's like, it's okay to be happy that I'm away from my parents, or it's normal to feel some anxiety about never having taken these tests before. If you know that those things could happen, and you talk about some of those in the summer, they might be less surprised if those feelings hit them. And the one other point that I would make on this, have some real intentional conversations about social media, because they are going to be studiously looking at their friends at other schools who seem like they're having vastly better times, and questioning like, oh, I should have gone to Georgia because everybody at Georgia is having a better time than I am at Tulane or whatever. And they don't necessarily have the perspective at that age to know that someone has taken 15 pictures before they see the one where I don't have a double chin, right? And they only post that one, or they only post the one that they're with all of their friends. So have some level setting that the social media that they're going to see from their friends at other places, or that are still in high school, or who are on their gap year, is not reflective of their day-to-day reality, and not to judge their own experience where they might be feeling bad on a certain day, based on the fact that they're only seeing the most carefully curated image of their friends' experiences.
Betsy, how long are you seeing with these COVID classes coming in? Is it taking longer for them to feel settled at school? Do you have any sense?
The benefit to some of these kids is that they're digital natives. So they've been making friends in online spaces for a long time. So that on some level has given them something of a leg up. I think certainly when everybody was masking, that was harder, harder not to see people's faces. I think what students are not expecting is how much effort it takes to make friends and to find your niche on campus. A lot of us think, well, I worked so hard to go to this school and I knew it was going to be the perfect school that it should all fall into place as soon as I'm there. But it takes a tremendous amount of effort. And the wonderful kids in that video did gave great advice about the more you put yourself out there, whether that's joining clubs or organizations, trying something that you never thought you could, pulling along a friend, or a roommate or a hallmate. Like, I'm an introvert and I always needed somebody to say, hey, 5 of us are going to this. And then I felt safe enough to go. But you build your sense of belonging and your sense of happiness at your school. It is directly proportional to the amount of things you try to get involved with.
Okay, I'm going to move to move-in day, which we already got a question about that. So we're taking care of one question. If you have questions, please put them in the chat so that they could get curated and sent to me. So move-in day, it's such a big emotional day. And in anticipation, you can have both sets of feelings and anything in between, right? Like, I think I'm going to fall apart, or I'm worried I'm not going to cry, right? Like, both of those things can cause as much anxiety. So Ronnie, can we prepare for that?
To a certain extent, yes. I mean, I'm a preparer, just like Betsy. I understand what she's saying, where I like to know in advance how I'm going to feel, how I'm going to react, what's going to happen. But to a certain extent, we can't really prepare, and also I think that's the other thing I want to say, not just move-in day, when we expect maybe that's going to be a time of high emotions, but in fact, you may be so focused on the minutia of putting together an piece of IKEA furniture that, you have no room left over for emotional reactions, or your kid is so busy going off, which happens at a lot of schools now, where they try to make that separation more natural by pulling in the parents and having events for parents, which is brilliant. And so, I'm not sure that that's the moment. It could be driving home, when you realize, oh, there's no one in the car. Or it could be, when you get up 3 days later and it suddenly hits you in a different way. Or you try calling, which the students were brilliant in recommending actually texting rather than calling. But you might get a call from your kid and you hear a wobbly voice or something and you feel like you're going to lose it. You just don't know. But what I would say to you about moving day is it's important to frame this as you're not saying goodbye to your child, okay? And not from the perspective of it's the end of your parenting. It's not. Your parenting is going to change. And it's very important that you're aware of that, because as your child grows and evolves, so does your relationship with him or her. But your connection will endure. You're not saying goodbye to being a parent. It may even improve. I mean, in my case, it's definitely been an improvement. And yesterday was an important day in reminding me of that.
Okay, so can I ask that we alternate, because we have a few more questions and then I have a few more questions and we want to take questions. So Betsy, at drop off, if my kid is having a hard time saying goodbye, do you have any tips of like how do you extract yourself from that moment?
I think you can do a couple of things. One, if you think your kid might be in that boat, you can write them a note, a card, a letter, something, tuck it under their pillow before you leave, and that they don't even see it. And that will be like a little bit of comfort. So that's one approach. The other approach is, as hard as it may feel at the time, don't linger. There's typically a cutoff point at which families should leave. The longer you stay, I'm just gonna spend one more night here and then we'll have one more breakfast or one more lunch. Every extension of time past when you should go means that your student is being sort of robbed, if you will, of the chance to bond with their classmates. But again, I think you talk about some of that stuff over the summer. If you think you're going to have a tough time when I leave, or vice versa, how might you handle it? What kinds of things could you do? Honey, you always feel better when you take a run. Maybe, plan for that. So have some sort of deliberate and intentional ways of thinking about what kinds of things soothe me, what kinds of things calm me, and understand that you can try to sort of acknowledge those feelings may come, but also just tell them, like, it's okay to be sad. Like, we have this almost pathological inability to handle our children's discomfort as parents, and I count myself, I'm saying we in this. It's okay for our kids to hurt and feel sad for a while, because typically it's temporary, right? And the way that they build resilience and grit and muscle memory to be able to handle the tough things life comes through us is by taking these tiny pains at times. And you can tell them things like, I know you've got this, honey. I trust you. You are ready. I know you're ready. You may have some bumps in the road, but you've got this. Those kinds of affirmations can also sometimes make it better. And at worst comes to worst, my late father used to occasionally slip me a 20, so I could, go shopping and get something. So I'm not above those tiny little treats too, just to put a smile on your face.
Okay, so Ronnie, I'm falling apart. My kid's moderately fine, but I'm falling apart. I can't. I'd like to control it because I don't want to put the burden on my kid, but how do I navigate that?
Yeah, well, I think what Betsy said was a very good suggestion, because I agree that when you linger too long, that's when that kind of thing can come about. So if you focus on what needs to get done, and you have a task or a series of tasks that you're looking at, and a lot of times schools will have a schedule, and I think it's great if they do. And then you can say, it's time to say goodbye. I love you. Have a great time. I'm here if you need me. I love the secret message idea. That's what we called it in our family, tucking a little note somewhere. And the other thing that you can say is, I'll check in with you tomorrow, or check in with me, we'll check in with each other. This is a discussion that you've had over the summer, like Betsy said. And then you leave, and whatever feelings you have, but if you really lose it, Sue, I mean, if you're forcing me to, I'm trying to prevent this, but let's say you're really losing it.
Let's just say you're like me.
No, then you just say, excuse me, I'm very emotional. This is me, just ignore me. I'm fine. Just let me be me, that kind of thing. And be sort of self-deprecating about it and laugh about it. And, if it is you, your kids are going to know that about you, and they're going to maybe, roll their eyes and everything, but secretly they'll say, oh, my mom really loves me. And that's it. You'll be fine. It's not the worst thing you can do.
Okay, I'm going to weave some of the questions that we've gotten, and then I have some more of our own afterwards that I want to get to, but these two are about siblings, which I think is really interesting. So one of them is the youngest kids going off to college. How do you prepare them for what might be a different experience, what likely will be a different experience than the older kids had? So Ronnie, you want to start with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. It really is, because I often work with students who are really devastated by an older sibling going off to school. That it's sort of neglected. I think that people don't pay enough attention to that. That's why I love this question. And I think it's important for that to be talked about, before kids go off to college, because younger siblings have never had the experience. They don't know how all-consuming college can be. And they really can take it personally when their older sibling doesn't seem to care. That's how they interpret it. I hardly ever text her with her anymore. We don't even talk on the phone. It's like she just disappeared, that kind of thing. So I think when you talk about it as a family, and you talk about this as a sort of a normal change that happens, and how is it going to be handled, and that, the older sibling might not have as much time as they had before, but you sensitize them to the fact that, oh, they have this younger sibling who really misses them. And you talk about when the vacations will be, and maybe the younger sibling can visit after they've had a chance to adjust, for quite a while. So again, just talking about it and making everybody aware of what the repercussions are for everyone, normalizing it.
The only thing I would add to that is, if you have a little bitty kid as a younger sibling, move-in time is not necessarily a great time to tag them along. But if you have an older tween or a teen, it can really ease the sibling's mind to have a mental picture, like a real visual picture of, like, this is where my big brother or sister is living, and these are the people around, and feel like they know that experience. So it can be helpful to let them come to move in, to let them come to family weekend, because that can help them go, okay, I know where my big brother or big sister is, and I feel okay about it.
I also had another experience in my house, which was it gave room for another sibling to kind of shine. It took away the older sibling and made extra space. So, it's like, again, hard to anticipate what's going to happen in your house. Okay. The other question was, so now it's the youngest sibling who's going to college and has lived through that experience multiple times for the older kids, but setting realistic expectations that you might have a different experience than your siblings.
That is exactly right. I would say that question kind of answers itself, that every child who goes through the college process can be completely different. I only have 2 children, and they were diametrically opposed. They just were nothing like each other. For me, it was like a whole different experience. And so I think that parents, if they're asking the question, they already know that, which is fantastic. And so by saying that, you're a whole different person than your sister, or your brother. And so, it may be a very different experience that you go through. You may like different things. You may gravitate to different things. And also, it's been X number of years since your sibling applied to college. And sometimes that makes a difference in terms of, what colleges are looking for, or the college process, standardized testing, things change. Look what happened during the pandemic. Right. So just setting that groundwork for them would be such a relief, because so much of the time, even if they don't talk about it, in their minds, they think that if they're different from their sibling, different means worse.
And I would take the expectation off the table by just naming, just because your older sister or brother went to school X does not mean I expect you to go there. There's only, there's no right or wrong college, but there's the one that's right for you, even if that's different from what your siblings did.
Yeah, and I find it the other way too. Like, we often think of older children as being high achievers, and the younger one or ones thinking they have to follow in that path. But I also see it in the reverse way, where older kids have had a difficult time in school for whatever the reason, and don't feel as if they're going to their top choice school. And the younger children feel like they owe it to their parents to kind of fulfill that dream for the parents. And so it can go both ways.
Okay, so now moving into a little bit about mental health, like, we know that there's a crisis with our kids right now, and college is spoken about all the time, about the crisis in college of mental health and mental wellness. We get a call from our kid during this transition time that they hate everything about their school. They want to come home. They're crying. Someone broke up with them. How do we know when we're supposed to be saying, okay, come home, and when it's those other blips in the road that you're talking about that, we should name and weather? So I think that's the scariest part. How do we know?
It is the scariest part. There's no question about that. What I would say to parents is that, remember that you're the expert on your child, okay? No one's going to know your child as well as you do. But at the same time, you may not be given all the information that you would want to get, And I think, I had this experience with both of my kids, where in their first semester of freshman year, they each had difficulties. And it kind of illustrates, I'll just tell the stories quickly. So it illustrate how to get involved or when to get involved. So with my daughter, she was having a health problem because her dorm was right next to the city's all-night emergency room. And so she was being awakened multiple times at night, and her immune system was shot, and she was getting strep infections and fevers and all this. And so she said, what can I do? And felt very, very helpless about it. But I said to her, well, why don't you find out, talk to the housing people and see what happens. And she did. And they said she needed a doctor's note. And so when she came home for a vacation, she had a doctor appointment. She got the doctor's note. She went back to, but we got involved we had to get involved in the sense that we said, this is not okay. Our child is sick. She needs a quiet room. With our other child, he was having a roommate problem. And it was unusual for him to say, I want to come home. I was like, what? It was, and the things that he told us about the roommate situation were bad, and I could see where he would want a different roommate situation, but it was sort of inexplicable. But again, because he was able to do it himself, we said to him, who do you need to talk to about getting a different roommate? He went to talk to the dean. He got a different room situation. But 4 years later, when he graduated, we found out that there was a lot more to the story, that this roommate was doing very illegal things in the room. And so it became clear to us. But so we didn't have that information. My son wanted to protect, he didn't want to be a rat or whatever. And so we had to go on the information that we had. But I think a good rule of thumb is to ask your kid, on a scale of 1 to 10, somehow this seems to work better than just asking them an open-ended question. How do you feel about this situation? Where 1 is it's completely out of control, and 10, you feel completely in control with it. So you get a sense of that, and you can try to troubleshoot with them. You can ask them what they've tried already. You can ask them what other resources might be available to them. And so trying to work it out with them over time. But I think deep down, if you see a real change in their personality or real change in their behavior, a real change in their sleeping or eating habits. You know, I've known parents who have said, I'm going to come down or up, whatever, and we'll just take you out to dinner Saturday night. And that's all they did. You know, they didn't stay the whole weekend. They didn't, but they took them out for dinner, maybe with a friend, maybe without a friend. And they just felt like, you know, seeing their kids and being with their kids was helpful in kind of getting a sense of things. So those are some ideas.
Betsy, what kind of roommate things do you see, and is the school helpful in those situations?
I see all kinds of roommate things. I think many American children have not shared a room with a sibling, and have, even if you sleepaway camp, you know, being in a camp with lots of different bunks is different than two people in a small room. So I think the things that help roommate situations the most are communication, diplomacy, and compromise. And having some conversation, again, over the summer, we have the luxury of time of doing it, to talk about, you know, you may have a roommate who throws away a half-eaten sandwich in the garbage can in your room without wrapping it in anything, and you might think that's disgusting. You know, how might you handle that? And give them time to sort of think about those things. Or how would you feel if your roommate came to you and said, I don't like this or that, something has to change? Where parents and families don't like the answer that I'm about to give you about how does the school help you, part of the lessons of college is how do I get along with people who I'm having difficulty with? So if my roommate is a pig and I'm not, I don't get to tell my RA, you know, this person's disgusting, I don't want to live with them. Part of my learning is how do I figure out how to negotiate something that works better for both of us, which means I'm going to have to give a little and the other person's going to have to give a little. Certainly in issues of safety, health, you know, bullying, threats, you know, anything like that, a school's going to do it. But what they're going to ask for is not just one time, but multiple times of those roommates sitting down and trying to negotiate what are the rules of the room. I'm a big proponent of starting that work as early as you can with your roommate. You know, here are the 3 things that are showstoppers for me. What are the things that are showstoppers for you? And try to get them both to work around it. But families, your best role when your kid is calling you about they hate their roommate or whatever is to be Switzerland and say, and avoid the temptation to react and say, gosh, honey, that I can hear how frustrated you are. Instead of, you know, getting worked up about it, instead of trying to fix it, think about those reflective consultant questions. What have you tried so far? Is there anybody on campus that you could talk to? Who might you go to that could have some advice? Isn't there an RA in your building? And try to step back from that that situation. But I would put one more thing in to sort of tag on to Ronnie's previous point. You know, when your students call you and they have that like frantic, I hate my roommate and I just failed my chem test and I should never have picked this school and blah, 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 everything is terrible. Much of the time you are their safe person and they are dumping all of their momentary spleen onto you because you're their safe person. One of the things that was the most helpful in my marriage was I would have a problem and my husband would be listening, or he'd have a problem and I'd be listening. And I'm always the get to the fix person. And he would be telling me about some frustration and I would be like, well, here's what you do, blah, 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 blah. And we kind of learned with each other to ask the question, what's my role here? Do you need somebody to listen and empathize? Do you need suggestions? Do you need somebody to take over and fix? So I would offer that as a potential thing to think about in the summer, having that conversation with your student to say, like, if you call me and you're saying, you know, da 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 da, I might ask you, what's my job here? Am I just venting or am I fixing? And I would encourage you not to fix for all the reasons that the student said that. But as an administrator, hearing from a lot of students, you would be mortified to know the number of times a student would come to an administrator's office and say, I'm so sorry my mom called you. I'm so sorry my dad emailed you. Your kids don't want you involved in those things most of the time. So, and I say that with love and gentleness. I know I'm right around the corner to doing that, but the question I would ask yourself is, before you pick up the phone to call that administrator or send that email, ask yourself, would you CC your kid on that email? And if the answer is no, you shouldn't be sending it.
Okay, that is
That's
the
great.
best piece of advice.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, if you have any questions, get them in the chat right this second. I am going to ask Betsy and Ronnie for their final question, which is, what should we look forward to?
So much. I just think so much. You know, it's been a while since my children graduated from college, but I found that there was so much maturation that went on during those college years. It was magical to me, particularly when they got to do some travel on their own. I thought the abroad situation was really pivotal, and our relationship changed, honestly, in so many fantastic ways as they became more comfortable with who they were, more sure of who they were, more comfortable in their own skins. Our relationship got deeper and closer. And, you know, I'm still their parent, right? But we're more friendly as opposed to, you know, we were never friends, right? But it's more of an adult to adult relationship now. And it's just, I find it so enjoyable. I mean, I loved being a parent when they were home, I thought. But I have to say, this is a time of life that is just wonderful, just much more joyous. And it's just, I'm loving it.
I think you're going to have lots of tiny joys. But I think the thing probably that's the coolest is watching them grow up into who they're meant to be. And that includes things like getting to know their friends. Like if you go to family weekend or whatever, make sure to get to know the people that are important to them, because those other students are going to be their family for the 9 or 10 months of the year while you're away. They're their family of choice, if you will. So, you know, get to know their friends, not in an intrusive way, but see what it is about their friends or what the friends love about your kid. Because it may be wonderful to see, you know, that their roommate says, Ian, who's my son, you know, Ian is always such a great listener when I have a problem. Like, it's affirming to kind of know those things and to see how other people see your children. But you've grown these like amazing little human beings who are growing up into big human beings. It will be fun to have an adult relationship with them, where you can just be each other, and appreciate each other for who you are.
Okay, Ronnie Cohen-Sandler and Betsy Chapman, amazing night, amazing information. And Ronnie, you want to plug your book?
Oh, sure. Thank you. My most recent book is called Anything But My Phone Mom: Raising Emotionally Resilient Daughters in the Digital Age. And it's really about mothering it's really about mothering and raising emotionally resilient teens. It's not just for mothers of daughters. But I think that one of the things that I have felt very strongly about in my career, whether it's my work or writing books, is really about the evolution of mothering over the lifespan and how it changes and how we adapt. And so being close with children has always been very, very important to me. Thank you, Sue.
Okay, and Betsy, you have a new resource page or something that was coming out?
I do. I have two things that I'll share, one of which, give me just a second to get to the right page. One of the things that we have is an advice for new families page. And while I work at Wake Forest and that's where it's meant to be, we do have a lot of sort of evergreen advice about parenting. The other thing I would say is, I'm putting this in the chat too, I write a daily blog for Wake Forest families called the Daily Deke that anybody can subscribe to. And it does cover Wake Forest things, of course, but it has a lot of just general parenting advice, particularly about things in the first year. So if that's something that interests you, you can check it out. You can subscribe to it and it'll come to your inbox. But you also, if you sign up and it's not for you, I'm not everybody's piece of cake. So you can unsubscribe at any time with no harm.
Well, so far, Amy is you're Amy's piece of cake. And then some random woman I met, I asked her and she said, I read every one of her emails throughout. It's so exceptional. So you're a lot of people's piece of cake.
Thank you.
And Jody said, thank you. This was very helpful and time well spent. Thanks so much, Jody. So we pass it back to Amy.
Guys, I mean, what a gift you just gave to our community. I am just so grateful to you. Thank you for being here. Okay, we're going to transition now into part 2. For those that want to stay on, this is really going to focus on logistics. Okay, what should you pack? What do you need to do this summer? What does your kid need to do? And so I think that this is going to be very helpful. We're going to talk about lists. I'm going to introduce Susie Greenberg and Amy Bennett-Shea. They are the founders of an amazing company called Campus Concierge. It is the Southeast all-in-one resource for students and their families. Susie and Amy are veteran parents and college transition experts. So I'm going to let them take it away.
Oh, thank you, Amy. I just want to thank Ronnie and Betsy also for an amazing program, and hope that we can piggyback on that discussion with some strategy for minimizing stress for this summer. But by way of introduction, I am Susie Greenberg, and together with Amy Shea, we are Campus Concierge. Amy and I have over 45 years of experience delivering student-centric solutions and parent-focused peace of mind with vetted resources. We became experts in the college journey by successfully launching our 8 children to college and grad school, and then working with dozens of other students from coast to coast. Our teams work with students in-state, far from home, international students, college athletes, and LGBTQ students. We meet the ordinary and the urgent needs of students domestically and often internationally as well. And to piggyback on the comments of Betsy and Ryan for advice for preparation over the summer, we developed this talk to present a strategy for minimizing stress. And we believe that a shared calendar of responsibilities and deadlines is the best logistical tool to organize time and communicate responsibilities this summer. A shared calendar will telegraph everyone's responsibilities in a constructive manner and that avoids confrontation. A shared calendar can be updated anytime to express a new obligation or highlight an accomplished goal. Most importantly, a shared calendar is a strategy that can transfer the responsibility of college preparation to your student in an incremental and manageable way over the summer.
Hello, everybody. I think you'll find that what we're about to talk about is very complementary to the comments that you've already heard this evening. Having a shared calendar, you can see that we've identified 5 buckets of information, and there are a lot of pieces of information and tasks that need to be accomplished over the summer before you go to college. Some of them are health related, some of them are communication. You heard that reoccurring theme that it's important to have communication with your students over the summer, have important conversations. There's financial pieces that need to be taken care of. There's student resources, understanding what's available to the student, both at the college campus and in the community they're moving to. There's the all important dorm room and roommate essentials, which gets a lot of airtime. And you may find there are other topics that you need to capture to address the summer. And calendars can be, a shared calendar can be a paper calendar. It can be a digital calendar. It's really what works best for your family. But what you want to make sure is that the calendar, kinds of things you're going to capture on it are deadlines and due dates, activities, appointments, and important conversations. That's a big piece of it. And when you're assigning things or adding things to the calendar, we think it's important to also take a look at who's responsible for that. So it's right there. If the students, for instance, making that doctor's appointment, or let's take finance as a sample, financial aid forms primarily filled out by parents actually, but it's important to make sure that that's happening. There's a deadline. The student may be involved in some ways, but that's something that you would record the due date on the calendar and who's responsible for it. If there's different deposits that need to be made, again, you want to capture that on the calendar. Budgeting is probably a really good, important conversation to have with your student. What is their expenses are going to look like? How are those expenses being funded? Who's responsible for different payment components? One of the examples I like to mention from time to time is with my kids, one of the things that was very important to me was making sure that they could always get home safely. So for me, having their Uber accounts on my credit card relieved a worry. I never had to worry about them running out of money when it came to Uber. From our family, it was just important for me to know that they could always get home. And that was something I was happy to pay for. So that would be one of those important conversations. And we actually would encourage you to schedule a time with your student to sit down and talk about the financial part or whatever the topic of the important conversation is. Do you need to get your student, or do you want to get your student an emergency credit card? What kind of banking details do you need to know? Are there direct deposit? All those particular tasks. Hopefully most of them are things your students can do, but some things clearly only the parent or the financier in this case are able to do. So those would all be items that would be placed on the shared calendar for everyone to see and know are being accomplished and who's responsible for it.
In addition to placing important discussions about finance and budgeting on the shared calendar, there are also the run-of-the-mill expected appointments and important health appointments and important other appointments that should be put on the calendar just so they are not forgotten. Here's a sample list. Not only do you have to see a physician and get a medical clearance, your dentist, your ophthalmologist, get your vaccinations, your prescriptions, your eyeglasses, have a mental health check-in if that's necessary, make sure you have your insurance cards. Those are checklist type of items, but they should definitely be on the calendar. They should be the student's responsibility in booking and certainly in attending. An insurance card might be a parent's responsibility because the child might still be on the parent's insurance as they go to college. However, if the student is going to be on the university's insurance, perhaps it's the student's obligation. We would suggest if you're unsure to make that clear in the calendar, color code it or just make a notation so that it's very clear. And in addition to these health-related appointments, essential appointments that should be on your shared calendar, there are other dates that should be included, such as important dates for sorority and fraternity rush deadlines, orientation meetings, and travel arrangements, to name a few. And briefly, I want to talk to you about waivers, because this HIPAA and FERPA waivers should be discussions that you schedule on your calendar with your child. And briefly, these waivers give institutions the permission to discuss medical and academic details with you as a parent. You might be surprised to learn that according to HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Insurance Act, doctors and hospitals may not engage with parents about their adult child's medical condition. But by discussing this change in legal status with your child over the summer and getting a HIPAA waiver from your student, you will have the authority to ask questions, and doctors will have the permission to discuss health matters with you. Additionally, and similarly, colleges and universities will not discuss your students' academic or lifestyle challenges without a FERPA waiver. This is true regardless of who pays the tuition bill. So if you want a college or university to engage with you regarding your child, it is necessary to provide the institution with an executed FERPA waiver. This is a conversation you must have with your child over the summer. It is their obligation to execute these waivers on your behalf. And if they are not done, you will have limited access to information, medical and academic. So we want you to keep those two important waivers in mind and make sure you plan and schedule to have those conversations with your kids.
So that all falls into the communication plan and scheduling important conversations. One of the things that we hear time and time again is students and parents frequently have a different idea about what's the right amount of communication. And we urge everyone to kind of find their inner Goldilocks, what's just right. And the best way to do that is to sit down with your student and talk about expectations. Some parents want to hear from their students every single day, or they're contacting their student every single day. And some students love that, and other students don't want to hear from you at all. I have 4 kids, and I had one of my children who I think I spoke to once over the phone. Independence and separation was super important. And the only time he called me was when he wanted to know what to do when he was sick. And all I could say was go to the infirmary. I have another child who communicates with me over almost every single day. And it's trying to find what the right balance is for you and your student, and really respecting your student's boundaries. But also making sure your student understands what, as a parent, you need in order to make sure that you feel comfortable that your student is well and healthy. So sitting down and talking about that and just making sure that you have you have a meeting of the minds is really important. And along with communication, some tasks that are good to put on your calendar is finding out who the emergency contact information is going to be. You have a child who's sick, this happened to us, we've got a call at 10:45 at night, running a high fever. Who do you call to help your child? How do you get in touch with the RA, or who's the appropriate person, or the roommate's information? And if you are allowed to have the roommate's contact information, what are the rules of the road for being able to contact the roommate so your student isn't apologizing for their crazy parent for calling them? Find out what kind of communication that the universities offer, both for regular communication and for emergency communication, and signing up for those important pieces of communication. And then if there's an emergency communication from the school, frequently it's a text message. How as a family are you going to handle that? What's the student's responsibility and what's yours in that case? So those are some of the communication issues that are important to sort out and have an idea before your child's there, so you don't have to figure it out on the fly.
There are other dorm and university essential deadlines that must be on your shared calendar. As discussed, there are medical appointments that must be completed, but the university also has a series of deadlines that must be met. And your shared calendar should include all the university deadlines, such as housing priorities, roommate selection, meal plan deadlines, parking permits, and the like. Your students should research these dates and insert them on the calendar so that deadlines don't slip by or come up as a last-minute crisis. The due dates and deadlines will also need to be included for parents. So for example, due dates for academic and housing deposits should be on the calendar, thereby putting parents on notice when they have an action item as well. Other related dates and discussions that should be scheduled and put on the calendar were previously mentioned by Betsy, but important to repeat. And they include conversations with the future roommate on the rules for the room, conversations for decor theme, and conversations for assigning dorm room essentials, such as the heavy refrigerator or microwave oven, so that there aren't 2 of everything in these small dorm rooms.
So that I know we're getting tight on time, so we'll try to be really brief. Student support services are something that we hope that everyone would look into. It's, life has changed since all of us went to college. I can't remember the last time my children had to use a printer at college because everything is submitted online. So, or there is a printer center at the school or a writing center. So taking some time and scheduling some time to explore what those resources are before your student gets to school will really serve them well. You can suggest it to them. Hopefully they will. Be that just even that better prepared for what's available to them when they get to college. We did send along, and I believe it's going to be distributed in a Google document. There's a list of, it looks like the summer prep checklist, and it hits some kind of big topics, what we've just discussed, some things you can check off your list. And then we have some tips for dorm room. Some of the tips are getting ready to go. You can almost find anything online these days, including the floor plan for a college dorm room, so you can get a sense of what will fit in the room and what won't fit in the room. Our counsel is less stuff is better. You can always add more to a room, but if you move everything you own into that tiny dorm room, it gets really crowded really fast, and a chaotic, cluttered space is not a refuge for your child. So if they can slim down what they take a little bit and get accustomed to the space and really figure out what they need to add to the room. E-commerce is a really wonderful thing, as is the US Postal Office. I mean, you can get something to just about anything to your child within 72 hours. So we like to say less is more to start with. The other thing that you'll find is that there are just a tremendous number of lists of everything your student needs to take to college. You can go on Pinterest, you can go on any e-commerce website, and they will have what you need to bring to college list. We really think that those lists should probably be renamed what to buy from us lists. It's really a lot of marketing and sales promotion. Not to say that your student isn't going to need some of the stuff on that list, but I've yet to meet a student who needed everything on those lists. We've attached a list that you'll have distributed to you, which says Ready, Set, Go, Dorm Room Essentials. Again, this is a list of everything your student might need, but probably not everything that your student does need. Go through the list, have your student figure out what's really important to them. It's good to remember what you need versus what you want, and then have a conversation with your student on what their priorities are and the wants. And then from there, based on your family's budget and logistics and space, what makes sense to actually bring initially and what to kind of hold off on and see how it goes. I think that's a couple of other tips. I think it probably makes sense to everybody. Seasonal wardrobes. Your child comes home for different school breaks, have them bring a big suitcase home and swap out their clothes for the next season. Those closets are never big enough to hold everybody's clothes all the time. There's two things we really like to use when we're helping our students. One is the IKEA blue bags. You've probably seen them. Amazon also has a similar bag that you can buy. You can ship them. You can take them on airplanes at checked baggage. They're almost indestructible, and they fold up to nothing for storage purposes. And a lot of kids want a rug in their college dorm room, which is great. Ruggables is one particular version we really like, but you can also find other washable and foldable rugs. Foldable rugs are great to be able to store over the summer. A piece of carpet is a lot harder to roll up and find a place to store. So those are two just items that we find work really well in college dorm rooms. And
we have found that families who create a shared calendar prior to the college launch experience less stress and fewer crises over the summer. But sometimes life gets in the way, and families do need support. That is where Campus Concierge fits in. Think of us as a security net for parents who cannot be in two places at one time. We manage the process or lend a helping hand for the expected or the unexpected in the student's college journey. We keep our eyes on the prize, and that is your student's well-being. We hope that you have found our shared calendar strategy and our letting go checklist to be helpful, and can take questions if there's time, or we'll accept emails anytime you have a question at concierge@campusconciergeservice.com. Thank you for inviting us.
You guys, thank you so much for being here. That was really helpful information. I know that that I used a lot of, I definitely calendared with my kids last summer and used their amazing list, which is in the chat. And we will also send it by email to everybody. But for the sake of time, I do want to sign off. If you want to stay and you have some specific questions, you want to turn on your camera, I will stay. And Susie and Amy can be here for just a couple more minutes. But I want to thank my amazing panelists. I want to thank the host committee. You guys were so helpful throughout this whole process. And I want to thank our amazing program partners. Thank you so much. You'll be hearing from us. We'll be sending you more resources. We'll be sending you video. We have so much to share with you. We're hoping to get together in person in the fall once the kids are off to college so we can have real conversations face to face. We care about you. Good luck to your kids. And just thanks for being here, everybody. We will send everything.